당신을 위해서라면 전 최선을 다할 거예요.
Anby has returned, this time with a fresh new look and role. She's also come with fresh names, two in fact, Silver Soldier Anby and Soldier Zero Anby. Our girl seems to have a bit of an identity crisis with picking her name, so let's call her SAnby for short. Unfortunately, it seems like she also has a bit of an identity crisis with her game plan. She's a character that promotes an out-of-stun playstyle, constantly being on field and doing damage. But she wants to have all her resources ready for a stun period rather than spending them out of stun. And she can be surprisingly difficult to build energy and decibels with. Yet it's these incongruous aspects of her kit that make her interesting. There's been no shortage of talk of how there's little room for optimizing on SAnby or that she has no tech. But the reality is, you can do some pretty crazy combos with her. So rather than saving the combos to the end, let's open with her and show off what it is that she can do. Believe it or not, SAnby can be a remarkably complex character. If you compare her to other technical characters, she may not look as flashy, but what may seem like simple combos on the surface actually demand airtight execution. So let's break down SAnby's kit and the intricacies behind her moveset, and go through some not widely known aspects that you need to know to maximize her combo damage. We'll cover fundamental game mechanics that help with throwing out every last hit in the stun period, as well as tech that can help you really boost SAnby's performance when out of stun too. We'll very briefly cover her disk drive, stats and vengeance, as well as go through some of her team options. Not necessarily in breaking down the numbers, but to get a sense of how SAnby's team composition can alter the way in which you play her. Then, we can close off with some encounter-specific knowledge that impacts her performance, and some extra tidbits to make sure you can get the most out of your combos. So sit tight, soldier, as this mission brief should set you up with the knowledge you need to excel. SAnby comes with a fresh new tag in Zenless, and that's Aftershock. You may think that Aftershocks are the follow-ups done by non-active characters, like Poker's Rending Claw or Trigger's Harmonizing Shock, but it's actually a lot simpler than that. Aftershock is a tag that can be applied to different kinds of attacks, like a special or a basic. In SAnby's case, parts of her special are granted that tag. So when SAnby dashes through an enemy with her special Azure Flash, she'll deal some small amount of dash damage and a big detonation of Aftershock damage, which comes from her White Thunder and Thunder Smite. Before we cover what these are though, let's talk about how SAnby works. Whenever you attack an enemy with her, you will begin building charge for her identity function, the Silver Star Mark. The Silver Star Mark is a gauge with a cap of 99. It's only visible when SAnby is the active character and will disappear when she's off. Swapping out and back does not decay the gauge though. Neither does the clock, as a charge built lingers without any time constraints. It can have a bit of a misleading design though, as it doesn't begin charging from a 12 o'clock position, but a 10 o'clock one. This is the Silver Star gauge at half charge, so don't get confused about how much charge you actually have. The gauge has notches to indicate different thresholds, at 33 charge, 66 charge, and 99 charge, so 1/3, 2/3, and full. Normally, SAnby's special is a low scaling cross slash, which builds a bit of the gauge. But if there's at least 33 charge in the Silver Star, then that special is transformed into Azure Flash, consuming the charge. The dash itself doesn't do much damage, but using up the silver star mark will trigger a detonation, the White Thunder, and that is what hits hard. Do it 3 times, and not only do you get the 3 dashes and White Thunder detonations, but you also get a bonus burst of damage, the Thunder Smite. Keep in mind you must do it 3 times consecutively, and on the same enemy. If you delay it too much, around 0.8 seconds, the game will consider a break and not trigger the Thunder Smite. Both White Thunder and the Thunder Smite are aftershock damage, and critically, the only sources of aftershock damage from SAnby. This is where knowing a bit about her core passive and additional ability is important. It's remarkably straightforward really. Some baseline damage and crit rate aside, SAnby gets an extra 30% value out of any crit damage she builds on aftershocks, and increases the entire squad's aftershock damage when she's the active character, hers included. As mentioned before though, only White Thunder and Thunder Smite are considered aftershock. That means her EX special isn't an aftershock. Neither is her chain attack. Or even her ultimate. Of course, they don't have to be aftershock to do respectable damage, but it does put emphasis on wanting to get as many Azure flashes as possible. It's to the point that even if you aren't triggering Thunder Smite, just getting 1 extra Azure flash and White Thunder by itself in a stun combo can be a sizable damage increase. Thankfully, any damaging attack that SAnby does, which is neither aftershock nor the Azure flash dash itself, will build Silver Star charge. So that's basic attacks, dash attacks, dodge counters, quick assists, assist follow-ups, chain attacks, EX specials, ultimates, and even SAnby's special if the Silver Star gauge doesn't have enough charge for an Azure flash. This is an important observation to make, because if you recall, this is something we use for optimizing her insta rotations. A big thing to note though is how much more some attacks will build over others. EX specials will immediately max out her gauge, as will her ultimate, and a single dodge counter will build just over half of it. Sure enough, this singular skill, the dodge counter, can feel like half of SAnby's kit. It's because of its absurd levels of build-up that she's primarily played on field, even in out-of-stun periods. SAnby has full invulnerability on her 4th basic string, and partial invulnerability on her 5th basic string. It's not there on startup, but it is for the whole leap portion, which makes it very useful at avoiding damage on field. But why would you ever want to? The first lesson in optimizing SAnby is don't rely on the invulnerability from her basics, because you're better off just dodge countering instead. Other than dodge counters, fast build-up takes resources, energy, and decibels. There aren't many ways to build Silver Star gauge quickly without EX, ultimate, or dodge counters, and enemies aren't going to be attacking you in stun for that dodge counter build-up. This may come across as a weakness at first. Despite being an on-field attacker, SAnby's game plan still revolves around saving up her resources for the stun period. That's no different from any of the other burst characters. It isn't because these skills are particularly strong though, but more so because they're the only ways of building up Silver Star gauge quickly when the enemy isn't attacking. If the enemy is attacking though, then why bother spending resources when you can just dodge counter and then burst them down? Constantly. It's not that SAnby doesn't reward bursting and stun, but rather that you don't need to wait for a stun to burst. In some content, like shield defense, you may be looking to kill before you even get to a stun. Still, even though her dodge counter is the most time and cost-effective way to build gauge, it isn't the only way to build gauge without spending resources. You don't want to just stand around and wait for enemies to attack you twice before you can Azure flash. You may not want to depend on basics for the invuln when you can dodge counter, but for when enemies aren't attacking, a full basic combo will build just about 50 gauge. Unfortunately, this isn't quite enough, as from a dodge counter, it leaves us just a little short of the 99 charge you'll need for 3 Azure flashes. With a cap of 99 though, if dodge counter gives 50 and so does a full basic string, that should add us up to a full gauge. But by basic attacking after a dodge counter, SAnby skips the first attack of her basic string, meaning we're just a little short. Thankfully, a relic of SAnby's A rank pass can help us here. It might have been a while since you last played the A rank version of Anby, so let me give you a quick refresher. When pausing for a bit after the 3rd basic attack, Andy would deliver an enhanced basic that did more damage and built more days. The same is true for SAnby, who gets access to an extra finisher hit if you stop mashing and actually time your attacks. The damage gain is negligible. It is a DPS gain for your rotation, sure. You always want to be doing it if possible. But we're less interested in the marginal damage gain on paper than we are on the Silver Star's charge gain in practice. That's because after a dodge counter, a full basic string with the basic 3 finisher builds just enough gauge to max out the Silver Star. which means 3 Azure Flashes, as well as the White Thunder and Thunder Smite that comes with it. It's also got another minor benefit, which is that it helps generate a little bit more energy for SAnby. SAnby's specials, as well as all of her aftershock damage, does not build any energy for her. And like every other character, chain attacks don't either. With how energy hungry SAnby is in her stun period, you really don't want to be just a little short halfway in your stun rotation. Just be careful with your stun setups, as a third basic finisher is a heavy attack, which can trigger chains preemptively. Aside from that though, you often want to try and fit it into the stun period if you're struggling for resources. For example, if you try doing a variation of the single EX combo showcased at the start, you won't have built enough Silver Star Gauge to get 3 Azure Flashes by spamming basic attack. But if you use a finisher, then it'll give you just about enough to fill it in full, making it mandatory for some combos. And talking about combos, there's one more quirk of SAnby's basic attacks that can help us optimize further. When doing the basic 4 string, mashing or holding down the basic attack button will have SAnby perform 5 attacks as she dashes through the enemy before transitioning into her final string. If you do all 5, SAnby will always, without question, link into her basic 5. But if you stop on the 4th dash or earlier, then you don't have to commit. Considering the amount of Silver Star charge that SAnby's basics build up to this point, then that means it's possible to link SAnby's basic 4 straight into an Azure Flash, which, for some combos, is the only way to sneak in some extra damage, as having to commit to that basic 5 animation will take far too long. Better yet, it allows us to dodge him midway through basic 4. Normally, SAnby would be animation locked out of dodge counters when using her basics 4 and 5. But with this, you can still get dodge counters without needing to commit to long animations. Sometimes though, you really need just a little bit more build up than what basic 4 cancel can offer. If you wait just the right amount of time after basic 4 cancel, you can go straight into basic 5. So by timing your inputs, you can get even more build up without sacrificing much additional time. While we're at it, why sacrifice any time at all on the dodge counter animation? Hogging field time is both a blessing and a curse. It lets SAnby pump damage while the rest of your team is waiting for resources to regen. But it also means that it can take a very long time to stun. It's not like SAnby's burst builds any kind of days. And if you're going to on-field a stunner instead, then SAnby's performance takes a hit, as there are many other characters that can do the stun window burst more effectively. But at the same time, her burst when in stun is still important, if not more so than her out of stun damage, depending on how you're stacking buffs and debuffs. Her strength is that she can burst both in and out of stun, so sacrificing one for the other is a problem. And we haven't even mentioned decibel management. Dodge counters are great and all for SAnby's burst, but don't offer much when it comes to decibel gain. Compare it with a perfect assist and it's absolutely no contest as to what's better. Considering ultimate maxes out the Silver Star Gauge, it's even more important to have it up for stun rotations, as you need it for the most optimal combos. Given that perfect assists both build days and decibels, it may seem like locking SAnby out of these is a way of balancing out her out of stun damage. After all, if you're dodging enemies, you aren't able to perfect assist. Unless you use the dodge assist tech. Since release, if you input a dodge, then attack, and character swap in quick succession, you can get both a dodge counter and a perfect assist, as well as a decibel gain from both of them. The game is quite lenient with how late you can input a perfect assist and still get it off. For most of the characters, this was a minor damage gain at best. Maybe some few resources depending on who you're playing. But since dodge counter is SAnby's primary way of building the Silver Star Gauge, and she lacks consistent days and decibel generation, this is very important for her damage. Depending on which characters you're running, this can help set up for debuffs, like with Nicole's dash attack. Or make use of characters' unique abilities, like charging a Pokra and getting a quick assist back. Or Caesar, by transitioning straight into overpowered shield bash. It can be a bit annoying to have to swap back to SAnby after swapping out, especially on hyper-aggressive enemies where you may accidentally perfect assist back to her. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, as SAnby's perfect assist generates the most decibels out of any currently released character. It also builds decent gauge, not enough to max out gauge after dodge counter, but if you use the basic 3 finisher, it will be just enough to top you up again. All of this is great and all, other than the fact that you can't dodge or perfect assist when an enemy is in stun. So to get the most out of SAnby's combos, we need to understand how stun works. I've already covered this in my frame perfect SAnby combo video, so I do encourage you to check it out for a more detailed breakdown. But in summary, the way that it works is when you trigger a chain attack on an enemy, or stun them, the stun bar pauses for a while before beginning to drop. This is the game calculating the time left in a stun period, so we call it a stun recalc. The problem is that the game can only perform one stun recalc at any given time, which means that overlapping them causes you to lose out on stun extensions. If you trigger a chain before the recalc ends from triggering stun, then you've only got one pause. But if you trigger a chain after the first stun recalc ends, you're now getting a second pause from the chain attack recalc as well. This means longer stun windows, which for SAnby means more agile flashes. With this knowledge, we can begin to refine our combos. For example, if you quick assist straight into 3 agile flashes, triggering chain on the final dash would overlap with the stun recalc, losing you time. But if you put the enemy in stun just before the quick assist lands, so that your hits are ever so slightly delayed, then you can benefit from both recalcs. Put side by side, and you can visibly see the difference in the stun number. You can also achieve this in the opener by ever so slightly delaying your agile flashes, but this can be difficult to do so with SAnby's manual chain. For those not aware of what manual chain is, it lets you stop proccing a chain attack if you hold down the basic attack or special button. It doesn't work for chain attacks or ultimates though, which does mean we have to work around it. But since it works for specials, this means we can use it to get agile flashes in and deplete the silver star gauge. Then make use of the gauge generation from SAnby's chain attacks to get even more agile flashes in a combo. Without manual chain, if you just try to use SAnby's agile flash on a stunned enemy, you immediately trigger a chain attack. Not to mention that most supports have very limited uptime on their strongest buffs and debuffs. So by spreading out your support chain attacks, you can achieve 100% uptime, which is an even greater damage gain than 1 or 2 extra specials. The inputs for manual chain can be annoying though. Holding special is a problem for SAnby because you tap special for agile flash and hold special for EX. Holding basic is an option here, but this can be a problem, as holding basic after an agile flash hits will cause SAnby to immediately transition into her basic attack string, which also interrupts your specials, and that means no Thunder Smites. You can try to time your special so that you're letting go just a few frames after they connect with the enemy. It's not too difficult once you get the hang of it, but I find it easier to just hold basic attack button and mash special really fast. This can impact how you set up your combos though, as using specials too fast may lead to losing out on a stun recalc if the final agile flash triggers a chain. If it's some reassurance, none of the combos that I've shown off in this guide need a slower agile flash with manual chain. And I have it in the combo notations which points it should hold down basic attack and for how long. But it is something to keep in mind for other rotations, like the one I cover in my frame perfect combo video. Before we get into the combo trivia though, let's cover off gear. You will want to be running the new disk drive set, Shadow Harmony. Arguably, you can get more value out of Hormone Punk if you can constantly refresh it while on field and time it to be up for your stun period. Sure, it says 10 seconds buff, 20 seconds cooldown, but the cooldown begins ticking from the swap in, so functionally 10 up, 10 down. But between constantly swapping in and out via the dodge assist tech and refreshing debuffs on the enemy to maximize damage, it's unrealistic to be so precise. The damage gain is negligible anyways, especially when considering that Shadow Harmony gives crit rate, which, depending on your engine, drive disk substats, and mindscapes, might be necessary to cap out crit. Remember that SAnby's bonuses are mostly related to crit damage, so if you don't have max crit rate, then you're missing out on all of those benefits when luck doesn't go your way. For the 2-piece, anything goes really. Any marginal percent differences you get will be made up by substats, so genuinely just run what you have with the best rolls. Woodpecker is the most consistent. It gives crit rate, and if you're not capped, then you want to be. Surprisingly, Brunch and Blade might not be that great a pick. As much value as SAnby gets out of crit damage, you can still oversaturate it. Just in case you're not aware, with the way the damage formula works, the more you get of one type of bonus, like crit damage, the less value it has comparatively to getting other stats. For SAnby, I believe a 1 to 2.3 ratio of crit rate to crit damage is a sweet spot, but don't quote me on that. You can refer to the creators and sheets I've linked in the description for more details. Thunder Metal works very well too, and is a pretty safe bet. SAnby does have quite a bit of damage percent up though, the 25% from her core passive to enemies marked with Silver Star, and the 25% on Aftershocks, both of which count, so her damage percent can get a little saturated. If you want to be very min-maxy, then the attack percent sets, like Astral Voice and Hormone Punk, are both solid choices. Although it depends on your discs. After all, you're guaranteed to run an attack percent D6, so down-saturate it somewhat. To be honest, how strong each 2-piece set is going to be will be riding on your stats and team composition more than anything. Puff Electro would work out better in teams where damage percent and attack percent become excessively saturated, like an Astra Caesar team, which is overly stacked in combat flat attack and damage percent, or Astra Arena, which scales very well with pen percent. But spoiler alert, Trigger's coming soon, and if you run her signature Wenjin, you get Death Shred, which has anti-synergy with pen ratio. So if you're running Trigger or Nicole, and especially if you're running Trigger and Nicole, you want to avoid pen percent completely. Which does lead us to stat choices. D6 is the easy pick, with attack percent being the only reasonable option. D5 would ride on which stats are most saturated. Electric damage percent is the safest bet, but you could also use attack percent and it'd be fine. Even with attack percent already on D6, this is partially balanced out by the damage percent on SAnby's passive. Really, you can have your D5 balanced out by your disk drive set. Maybe you run Astral Voice 2-piece, but electric percent D5 for example. Pen percent follows the same reasonings as Buffer Electro. If you're running a team that benefits from it, then the more pen percent the better. But if you have anti-synergies, then do your best to avoid it. D4 though is dependent on your Wenjin really. If you're using Signature, then you need crit rate. If you're using a crit rate Wenjin though, like Malharo Desire, or even other characters' signatures like Evelyn's Wenjin, then you want crit damage. Which does lead us to the Wenjins. Gone are the days of 6% improvements between Signature and A-rank free-to-play options. You're looking at a greater than 30% damage difference between SAnby's Signature and A-rank Wenjins like Malharo Desire and Starlight Engine. Although if you have other SIGs like Evelyn's or even Harumasa's, that difference is more like 16%. Brimstone can be okay in the out-of-stun period, but in case you haven't realized it, most combos have very few basic attacks in them, so most stacks will fall off. It's still better than the A-rank options, especially when out of stun, but nothing to write home about. I think a lot of people are interested in knowing which Wenjin to prioritize, SAnby's or Trigger's. As mentioned, it's a more than 30% damage difference between SAnby and an A-rank option, and 16% between it and other limited signatures. Trigger's Wenjin is roughly an 18% increase instead, so it is weaker in that regard, but keep in mind that her buffs apply to the whole team. And in teams that stack it, like with Nicole, it gets even better. So if you're tied between them, then it comes down to whether you want to roll just for SAnby damage, or if you want to have a more flexible unit that can support all characters. And that's worth considering, as you shouldn't think of SAnby's team as units that are there just to support her personal damage. Look at it more holistically on what they offer and how they interact with her kit. From my own experience, SAnby currently performs best with Astra and Nicole, and that's a bit unsurprising given how they can more or less carry any damage dealer. But Nicole in particular works especially well with SAnby due to her fast and damaging chain attacks, good decibel generation, and the fact that with proper combo routing, you can maintain 100% of her debuff uptime. You can also swap to her and readily apply her debuff even without energy in the out of stun periods prior to using Azure Flashes. As for Astra, she's a great unit overall, with strong buffs and the ability to force quick assists even without energy, meaning permanent Astral Voice uptime. At first glance, her ultimate's quirk of giving chains on quick assist doesn't seem particularly good for SAnby. If you recall, chain attacks are not aftershocks, and without that tag, its damage values are not very impressive. You might just be getting more damage by using chains on your supports instead. But since SAnby chains build Silver Star gauge, Astra allows for both double support chains and double SAnby chains, which builds enough gauge for an extra dash. The big weakness of the Astra Nicole comp is a slow time to stun, so even their huge benefits are tempered with fewer burst opportunities. But with SAnby always bursting, this works particularly well for her and makes it arguably the most competitive team right now. Caesar is a great pick as well, as she offers good days and decibel generation via her perfect assist, as well as very solid buffs. Other characters struggle with Caesar as her buff is only ever present on the currently active character, which conflicts with their rotations. Since there aren't really any swap cancels for SAnby, you can have near 100% uptime of Caesar's buff, while getting arguably the most value out of any character pick for the dodge assist deck. Not to mention that, as a defender, she only uses up 1 assist point on parries, which means even more opportunities to dodge assist deck. Shingi is a decent pick too, despite being a field hog, as her stun damage percent modifier is just that strong. Doubly so for enemies with low modifiers, as it makes her increase even more noticeable. And like Caesar, she also only uses up 1 assist point on parries. Pokra is a surprisingly competitive choice too, if you have her at M6 that is. As she's an aftershock stunner, she benefits from SAnby's passive so she can contribute good damage. Her fast special cast also makes certain combos be way easier to execute, as she can quickly trigger chains. And since she can reverse quick assist back to SAnby after a dodge assist deck, it makes gameplay flow very nicely. I'd say for SAnby, you want at least one of these characters in her team. Nicole for some of the strongest debuffs and fast chain activations. Astra for the best buffs in the game and double chains. Caesar for buffs too, but also survivability, daze and decibel generation. Shingi for the faster stun time and burst potential. or Pokra for consistent damage and seamless gameplay. Trigger, of course, is her premium support. Days build up even when not the active character, more damage both in and out of stun, and she has great synergies with the other supports, as she only buffs stun damage percentage, so no stat saturation. The one thing she does saturate is Death Shred with her signature, and that has stronger scaling the more you have of it, so it works out even better when running her with Nicole. Unfortunately, we don't have Trigger yet, and not everyone will be rolling for her anyways. Other supports like Karina and Lucy also work well, provided you've built them. As mentioned before, units aren't just there to buff SAnby's personal damage, and given their high modifiers, can more than pull their weight in damage. Not to mention that support wenches are probably some of the strongest in the game, so there's no harm in running more of them. And the energy regen that you get from support ultimates is very good for Deadly Assault, doubly so when coupled with energy regen buffs. With the right combo, you can get 12 Agile Flashes without needing to use SAnby's ultimate, massively increasing total damage in the run by alternating between SAnby and support ultimates. When building a team, also think of the disk drive options available. You may want to run both Astra Voice and Swing Jabs, as you likely want to chain attack with your support. But if you want more out of stun damage, you can just run Protopunk on your stunners. This is especially good for Caesar and Pokra, who don't really benefit from a 4P Shockstar Disco. Although it can be a problem if enemies aren't attacking often. To be fair, this is a problem for SAnby in general too, as she really struggles in doing well against enemies that aren't aggressive. And right now she's in an unfortunate position where there just isn't really any content that's good for her. There's been no shortage of complaints on SAnby's performance, and in my opinion, that's in large part not because she as a character is weak, but because she has no encounters that enable her. Bosses like Typhon pretty much stun themselves, and have passives that increase the damage they take in stun. So there isn't really much of a point for a character that does out of stun damage if the fight is made for in-stun burst. Corruption Complex is arguably even worse, as SAnby's White Thunder and Thunder Smite are activated on the main body, not the legs, so she's terrible at getting impairs. Compare her to a character like Shoyuan, and it's embarrassing just how much longer it takes for her to get an impair. And it's a bit ironic that the boss SAnby is meant to counter has anti-synergy with her kit. The Electric Weak bosses stun very fast too. Not just Typhon, but Corruption Complex as well, which means SAnby is often lacking in energy when going into the stun period. With Agile Flash not generating energy, having good resource management is not easy. It's also ironic that the electric resistant boss, Notorious Pompeii, is arguably the best matchup for SAnby with his constant attacks. Depending on the Deadly Assault rotation, he even takes more damage the longer he's out of stun, so all the better for SAnby. I'm not implying SAnby is good against Pompeii, because she isn't. The resistances in this game are a really big deal. But I am trying to say that if you're finding SAnby to be underwhelming, it isn't necessarily her kit that's the problem, but the lack of encounters that reward her game plan. As we get more enemies and bosses that play ball with SAnby's out-of-stun game plan, then she'll start to feel a lot better. Before I bid farewell though, there's a few things of note about the combos that's worth knowing. First, you want to always apply Astral Voice with a quick assist before your combo begins, which is a pretty generic tip. But you don't need to trigger every stun with it, and in fact, some combos are better off started with Azure Flash instead to get more time and stun. And thankfully, there are quite a few points in which you want to quick assist the SAnby in her combos, so there is no problem with it falling off. You may also find yourself struggling to land 13 Agile Flashes in one stun, as the execution can be quite tight. But chuck it into a calculator, and so long as you aren't running Qingyi, it is still better to get 13 Agile Flashes with the final hit and Thunder Smite being out of stun, than 12 Agile Flashes with all of them being in stun. The value add from having an extra dash makes up for the damage loss. But if you're not doing extra Agile Flashes and you're still struggling to get it all in, then it's better to get your Agile Flashes out of stun in the opener instead. Another fun little thing is that it is possible to go straight into basic 4 out of an EX special, but I haven't found any genuine combo users for this yet. It may have some niche use on generating extra energy during some stun combos if you're just about short for a double or triple EX. When it comes to Mindscapes, only M2 adds any real sort of gameplay change, as it enables you to get 17 specials in a stun and 1 outside, due to the extra Agile Flashes that the ultimate can provide. Thanks to Nas for trying it out for me, but I've decided to roleplay by stitching some footage together. There's also a few other extra combos that I didn't show off at the start that may be worth mentioning. The single EX combo has slightly different routing with supports that aren't Nicole, for example. You can also do the 13 special double SAnby and support chain combo without triple ultimates, and still maintain full Nicole debuff uptime. It becomes a 12+1 special combo, but that's still better than just 12. That way, you can alternate between the 13 specials and no SAnby ultimate combo by relying on Nicole's energy generation. And then for when you do have Astra and SAnby's ultimates ready, you can do a very strong 12+1 combo. So let's get on with it and show off a few more combos that SAnby can do. This guide is a little late in coming, but unfortunately I don't have access to the creator experience server. And unlike Evelyn, where we've had a playground to mess around with her prior to release, SAnby's gotten no such treatment, so I need to lab everything when this character drops, and that can take a bit of time. But that extra time has allowed for discourse on the character to develop. How she has no optimization, has as much depth as a roadside puddle, or is just all in all quite underwhelming. SAnby is undeniably very simple. It'd be dishonest of me to claim otherwise. I do think there's been a bit of misdirection of focus though. She absolutely does have some very tight execution requirements. A 1/10 of a second can be the difference between landing 12 and 13 agile flashes in a stun. But she also has complex setups, needing to manage her assist points, pay a close eye to energy before every stun, and try to sustain Astral Voice for as long as possible. And all that without even touching on character-specific optimizations, like Nicole's debuff maintenance. As we start getting more diversity of enemies and encounters in the game, I think more and more people will begin to see that optimizing her is not quite as simple as it sounds. For now though, that's all from me. If you like learning about niche character techs or want detailed character guides that focus on execution, then do like, share, subscribe and ring the bell. I've got more videos coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.